Mom's sick so I came instead. Little girl walked into the blind date. What the millionaire CEO? It's already past 3:30. The bell above the door chimed softly each time a customer entered Maple and Honey, a cozy neighborhood bakery. Ethan Carter sat at a corner table alone. 35, perfectly dressed in a charcoal coat. He looked calm, but the kind of calm built over years of holding everything in. As the CEO of a fast-growing tech company, he was used to pressure, not blind dates. Yet that's why he was here. Because Olivia had insisted. She'd known Ethan long enough to see through his stoic walls. And she also happened to be close friends with Emma, the baker, who worked here. Her voice still echoed in his mind. Ethan, she's not like anyone you've met. She's kind. She works hard. She's raising her daughter alone. She deserves someone gentle than some softer. And you deserve someone who lets you breathe. He didn't believe in magical meetings, but he trusted Olivia. After 3 years of closing himself off, agreeing to this one blind date felt like something small but maybe important. He checked his watch. Almost time. He expected a woman. Maybe a little nervous, maybe unsure. He didn't expect what happened next. The bell chimed again. A little girl, no more than 4, walked in wearing a pink dress and pigtails. One neat and the other slightly lopsided. Her shoes tapped gently on the floor as she scanned the room with big brown eyes. Her gaze locked on him. Then she walked straight to his table. Ethan blinked, unsure whether to speak or stand. She stopped beside him and announced, Mom is sick, so I came instead. The entire bakery seemed to pause. A barista froze mid-step. A couple turned from the counter. No one said a word. Ethan leaned down, meeting her eye level. You came for your mom's date? The girl nodded, serious and firm. He softened his tone. Why would you do that? She looked down and fiddled with the hem of her dress before replying. Because I heard Aunt Olivia say this could make Mommy happy. I don't know what a date is, but Mommy hasn't laughed in a very long time. Her voice wavered. Not with fear, but honesty. Ethan felt something in his chest tighten. What's your name? He asked. She lifted her chin proudly. Sophie, I'm 4.5. Mommy is Emma. She works here. She makes the pies. Ethan recognized the name. The quiet blonde woman behind the counter on the days he'd come in after long meetings. Always focused, always polite. Her smile rarely reaching her eyes. Sophie continued. Mommy wanted to cancel. She said she was too sick and tired, but I thought if someone nice came, maybe she'd try to smile again. A child who didn't understand love or loneliness, yet somehow understood what her mother needed most. Ethan pulled out the chair beside him. Do you like hot chocolate? She nodded so hard her pigtails bounced. While the drink was being prepared, Ethan asked, What makes your mom happy? Sophie didn't hesitate. She held up her fingers as she counted. When I draw her hearts. When I tell her she's pretty. When I say I miss Daddy, but I'm glad she's here. The words hit him like a soft punch. Gentle but devastating. He looked at her. This tiny girl with a huge heart who had shown up alone. All because she thought her mom deserved a reason to smile. She wasn't scared. She wasn't confused. She was on a mission. This wasn't an ordinary blind date. And this certainly wasn't an ordinary child. As Sophie dipped her spoon into the whipped cream, humming to herself, Ethan leaned back slightly and took her in. Her courage, her honesty, her hope. He didn't know if Emma would ever show up. But in that moment, he understood something with clarity. This isn't about meeting a woman tonight, he thought. This is about meeting the bravest little girl I've ever known. The waitress brought over 2 plates of warm pie and a mug of hot chocolate topped with a generous swirl of whipped cream. Sophie clapped softly, her eyes sparkling. That's the one Mommy made this morning, she said, pointing excitedly. Blueberry with cinnamon on the edges. She says cinnamon hugs your tummy. Ethan smiled, watching her spoon the whipped cream carefully, determined not to spill. It was like watching sunshine talk. She was bright, expressive, and completely unfiltered. I did not know I was having dinner with such a pie expert, Ethan said. Sophie looked proud. I help Mommy in the kitchen. Well, not with the oven. But I decorate boxes and I lick the spoon when she's not looking. She paused, then added thoughtfully. Mommy always smiles when she bakes blueberry pies. I think it's her happy pie. Ethan leaned back, sipping his coffee. So tell me, Miss Sophie, what else makes your mom happy? Sophie swung her feet under the table, thinking, she laughs when I tell her knock-knock jokes, or when I draw silly faces on her lunch napkins. And she said, Sophie leaned in a little like she was about to reveal a secret. She said she would only go on a date if the person is nice to me. Ethan chuckled gently. So, am I passing your test so far? Sophie looked at him seriously as if assessing a report card. You didn't laugh when I said I came instead, she said. That means you're kind. He blinked. That unexpected honesty wrapped itself around him like a quiet truth he had not realized he needed. There was a silence, a soft, comfortable one. Then Sophie tilted her head. Where's your little girl or boy? Ethan looked down for a moment, his fingers brushing the handle of his cup. I don't have one, he said. I lost someone a long time ago, and I never really found my way back to people after that. Sophie considered this with the weight only children carry when they understand too much too soon. Mommy lost Daddy, she said softly. But I told her I'd share my heart until it doesn't hurt anymore. Ethan swallowed. He stared at her. This tiny human with wide eyes and a wisdom far beyond her years. You're something special, Sophie, he said. She smiled shyly. The waitress returned with a small slice of pie and placed it in front of Sophie. Sophie gasped. That's my favorite. Mommy still baked this morning even though she had a fever. She cut the pie in half with her fork carefully, as if it were a piece of treasure, and pushed the bigger half across the table toward Ethan. You should eat it, she said. I think you need happy pie more than me. Ethan could not speak. He nodded and took a bite. The warmth of the crust, the burst of blueberries. It was comfort folded into food. It tasted like care, and just as he swallowed, the door of the bakery flung open. Sophie, the voice came in short, breathless gasps. A woman stood at the threshold, blonde hair in a messy ponytail, cheeks flushed from the cold, an apron still tied around her waist. Emma. Her eyes landed on her daughter sitting at a table with a strange man. Sophie waved enthusiastically. Mommy, he's really nice and he likes your happy pie. Emma stared at Ethan, her gaze flickering from his kind expression to the napkin he held delicately, having just wiped a spot of chocolate from Sophie's chin. Ethan stood immediately. Emma, I am so sorry. She said you were sick. I didn't know she had come on her own. I thought. Emma knelt down and scooped Sophie into her arms. I turned around for 1 minute. She murmured more to herself than anyone. You can't just walk out like that. Sophie wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. I just wanted you to be happy again. Emma's eyes glistened. She looked up at Ethan, the initial panic fading into a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. I didn't know. I'm sorry she bothered you. Ethan shook his head gently. She didn't, he said quietly. She reminded me what kindness looks like. For a moment, none of them spoke. Outside, the winter wind danced across the bakery window. But inside, something warmer had begun to rise. And Ethan knew this was no ordinary evening. This was the beginning of something unexpected. Something real. After the whirlwind of the unexpected meeting, the bakery had quieted. Most customers had left. The soft hum of the heater filled the cozy space, blending with the occasional clink of coffee cups being washed in the back. Ethan lingered by the door for a moment, unsure if he should go or stay. Emma was still sitting at the corner table, Sophie curled against her chest, now fast asleep, tiny fingers tangled in her mother's sweater. He cleared his throat gently. I heard you were sick, he said. Are you feeling better? Emma looked up, visibly caught between residual embarrassment and exhaustion. I'm fine, she replied quickly, almost reflexively. Just needed a bit of rest. Ethan gave a small nod. Well, how about a warm drink just for a few minutes? You look like you haven't sat down properly all day. Emma hesitated, but Sophie shifted slightly in her arms, letting out a soft sigh. Emma gently adjusted her daughter, then nodded. Okay, just for a few minutes. Ethan guided her toward a quieter corner table by the window. The lights outside had dimmed. Snow flurries danced under the amber glow of a street lamp. Inside, warmth wrapped around them like a gentle blanket. Sophie remained asleep, her cheek pressed to Emma's shoulder. Emma spoke first, voice low. My husband died 2 years ago, she said. Car accident. One moment we were planning Sophie's 3rd birthday and the next. She trailed off, eyes distant. I didn't have time to grieve. Rent was due. Sophie needed me, so I baked, learned from scratch, burned the first 2 months of everything. But the oven became the one place where I could pretend things were okay. Ethan's gaze never left her face. He saw more than just tired eyes and flour-stained sleeves. He saw the weight she carried. You know, he said slowly. Someone once told me that the strongest people are the ones who never realize they are. Emma let out a breath that was almost a laugh, almost a sigh. Well, that person clearly never saw me crying over pie dough at 3 m.m. Ethan smiled soft and sincere. I think that person would admire you a lot. There was a silence, but not the awkward kind. It was a silence that let truth settle, that allowed two people who had lived through their own storms to acknowledge quietly that they had both survived. Then a small voice broke it. Sophie stirred, blinking sleepily. Her tiny voice was muffled by her thumb still half in her mouth. Are you going to leave now? Ethan leaned forward, his tone playful but gentle. Only if your mommy tells me to. Sophie looked up at her mother. Emma looked back at her, then at Ethan. She did not speak. She did not smile. Instead, she simply reached out and pulled the chair next to her a little closer to the table. Ethan sat down. No words were needed. For the first time in 2 years, Emma let someone stay. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan did not feel like an outsider walking into someone else's life. It was not a grand gesture, not a dramatic moment, just a tired woman, a sleeping child, and a man who knew how to be still and stay. The bakery lights flickered slightly as the heater kicked on again. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, something warmer had started to grow. The grocery store was quiet that Thursday evening, its aisles bathed in a soft yellow glow. The rush hour had passed, leaving behind only the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional wheel of a shopping cart echoing between the shelves. Emma pushed a half-full cart through the produce section. Her blonde hair was tied in a loose bun and flour still dusted the sleeve of her cardigan, a clear sign she had come straight from the bakery. Her eyes looked tired, but her hands moved with gentle precision, checking for discounts, squeezing avocados, comparing prices. Sitting in the front basket was Sophie, swinging her legs and quietly humming a tune only 4-year-olds seemed to know by heart. She hugged a small plush bunny and watched her mother with curious, trusting eyes. At the far end of the store, Ethan Carter stood at the int or coffee kiosk, waiting for his assistant to return with a folder of paperwork. He was half scrolling through his phone when someone caught his attention. Sophie, she spotted him first. Mommy, that's the man I had cocoa with, she exclaimed, waving enthusiastically. Emma froze. She turned toward the voice, and their eyes met across the aisle. For a split second, Emma looked like she might pretend not to see him. But Ethan was already walking over, not with hesitation, but with warmth in his step and a quiet smile. What a coincidence, he said casually. You two taking a break from the bakery world? Emma tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, flustered but polite, just grabbing a few things, trying to make sure she still eats something with green in it before payday. Her voice wasn't self-pitying. It was matter of fact, the kind of quiet honesty that made Ethan pause. As they walked together down another aisle, Emma asked Sophie, which yogurt do you want, strawberry or peach? Sophie tilted her head thoughtfully, then whispered, which one is cheaper, Mommy? Ethan's smile faltered, his chest tightening just a little. Emma laughed softly, though her eyes didn't. She's been learning how to choose between things since before she could count properly. They reached the checkout. Emma began unloading items onto the conveyor, checking and double-checking the price tags. While her back was turned, Ethan stepped ahead to another register, handed the cashier a folded note, and quietly said, "Please scan this gift card first. Add a bag of the organic vegetables in that pastry she looked at. Don't say who it's from." He didn't stick around. He walked back to the coffee kiosk and waited. When Emma stepped outside, she peeked into one of the shopping bags. Nestled between the milk and rice was a small box of peach yogurt and a brown paper bag with 2 warm mini pastries. Treats she hadn't picked out. Sophie's eyes lit up. "My favorite. Did you get these, Mommy?" Emma glanced around and her eyes landed on a familiar car parked across the lot. Inside, behind the windshield, Ethan sat in the driver's seat. He did not wave, did not honk. He simply watched calmly, quietly, until her gaze met his. Emma didn't call out. She just held the bag a little closer to her chest and whispered, "Thank you for seeing us." The night air was crisp. The sidewalk shimmered faintly from an earlier drizzle. Emma and Sophie walked hand in hand toward home, a small family of 2 walking a little lighter behind them. Ethan remained in his car, hand resting on the wheel, eyes soft with something that wasn't quite longing, but something close. And in that ordinary moment, between grocery lists and unpaid bills, something unspoken passed between them. They had seen each other and that had changed everything. The sky broke open without warning. Emma tightened her grip on Sophie's small hand as the first drops fell. They were halfway home, walking the long stretch between the market and the rundown row of rental units at the end of the street. Her thin cardigan clung to her shoulders already soaked. Sophie shivered under her little hoodie. "It's okay, Mommy. We're almost home," the girl whispered, though her lips trembled. Just then, headlights splashed across the slick sidewalk. A silver SUV rolled to a stop beside them. The window slid down. Ethan stepped out, holding a large black umbrella that covered him in one smooth arc. Without a word, he tilted it over both of them. "Get in," he said gently. "You'll both catch a cold like this." Emma hesitated, pride bristling for a brief moment. But then she looked into his eyes, not pitying, not forceful, just concerned. She nodded once. Inside the warm car, Sophie curled into the back seat with a soft sigh. Emma rubbed her arms dry with a napkin Ethan handed her. The drive was quiet until they turned onto the narrow gravel path leading to her building. Ethan's gaze flicked to the rusted sign above the gate, the peeling numbers, the mailbox held together with duct tape. The car had barely stopped before the front door creaked open. A woman stood on the porch, arms crossed. "The landlord. Emma, you're 2 weeks late on rent," she barked, eyeing the luxury car suspiciously. "Today's the deadline. I can't keep your room open forever." Emma froze. Sophie looked up at her, confusion darkening her eyes. "Did we do something wrong, Mommy?" she asked quietly. Emma swallowed hard. Her cheeks burned hotter than the rain. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Ethan stepped forward, crouching slightly to meet Sophie's eye. "You were very brave in the rain, little lady," he said softly. Then he turned to Emma. "I'll let you settle in. Good night." No judgment, no interference, just kindness wrapped in the dignity of silence. He left without waiting for a response, but the warmth he left behind lingered long after the tail lights faded. The next morning, Emma was scrubbing the floor when a knock came at the door. The landlady, wearing an uncharacteristically wide smile, stood outside. "Emma," she chirped, "I just got a full payment this morning. 6 months rent paid up front. Someone must really care about you." Emma stared at her. "There must be a mistake." "I didn't. No mistake. Also, someone's coming by to fix the heater and that broken sink free of charge. Just a little appreciation for a great tenant, you know." The door closed. Emma stood frozen, heart hammering against her ribs. She did not need to ask. She already knew. Sophie padded out of the bedroom holding a crayon drawing with both hands. "I finished it," she said proudly. The picture showed a woman with yellow hair holding hands with a little girl in a pink dress. Behind them, just a little to the side, was a tall man with an umbrella smiling, even though he stood in the rain alone. "That's the man who brings sunshine when it rains," Sophie announced, her voice innocent and sure. Emma blinked back, the sting in her eyes. She did not text Ethan, did not call. Instead, she baked a small tart crust, blueberry filling with a hint of vanilla, his favorite. She wrapped it carefully in parchment, tied a simple blue ribbon around the box, and left it on the bakery counter. A note tucked beneath the bow read, "For someone who brings sunshine quietly." Ethan found the box on his desk the next morning. There was no name, no return address, but he did not need one. He smiled, then placed the box gently beside his laptop, like a secret he intended to keep. And outside the window of his high-rise office, the rain had finally stopped. The next morning, the bell above the bakery door gave a soft jingle. Emma looked up from behind the counter, her eyes widening as she saw Ethan step inside. He carried no umbrella this time, no suit or pretense, just a warm smile and a quiet presence. "I figured," he said, approaching the counter casually, "that blueberry tart deserves a second chance." Emma blinked, caught between surprise and a sudden flutter in her chest. She tucked the stray hair behind her ear and gave a small amused nod. "Well," she said, "we did bake them fresh this morning." She gestured to the table near the window, and he took a seat. It was the same corner where Sophie had once introduced herself in place of her mother. Only this time Ethan wasn't meeting a stranger. He was returning to something that had already started. From the back room, Sophie's voice rang out. "It's the umbrella man." She darted into the room, her little sneakers squeaking against the tiled floor. Her eyes sparkled with delight and her arms opened in a dramatic welcome. Ethan laughed softly and knelt to her level. "Did your castle get fixed yet, Princess?" Sophie nodded with pride and pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. I drew a new one. See on the page in bright crayon colors was a house with 3 stick figures. One tall, one with a ponytail and one small with pigtails. A yellow sun beamed Clear's throat in the corner. A chubby gray cat sat on the porch. That's us, she explained, and whiskers. He's imaginary, but Mommy says we'll get a real cat someday. Ethan looked at the drawing for a long moment before handing it back. Looks like the happiest castle I've ever seen. Emma brought 2 drinks to the table. Coffee for Ethan and warm milk with cinnamon for Sophie. They sat together, an unlikely trio that didn't feel unlikely anymore. They didn't talk about the rent or the rain or anything that might make things uncomfortable. Instead, they spoke of lighter things. Emma told him about how she used to bake with her grandmother, how she once ruined a batch of cookies because she mistook salt for sugar. Ethan, in turn, shared a memory about sneaking into the kitchen as a child to steal spoonfuls of whipped cream, only to be caught every time. He listened more than he spoke. His phone stayed in his pocket. When he laughed, it was real. When he smiled, it reached his eyes. Sophie climbed onto her usual stool, but grew restless as customers began to trickle in. Emma tried to manage the growing line while keeping her daughter close, but it was getting difficult. Just as she reached for Sophie's hand, Ethan stood, rolled up his sleeves, and headed toward the sink. Where do you keep the clean towels? Emma stared at him, confused. I can dry trays, he said, or make cocoa. I'm certified in stirring things gently. She hesitated, but his tone was so light, so natural that she only nodded. In that drawer, she said. Within minutes, he was helping, wiping counters, refilling the sugar jars, passing out napkins with a quiet enjoy your morning to each customer. At one point, a silver-haired woman reached for her coffee and glanced between Emma and Ethan with a knowing smile. Your husband's a keeper, she said in a voice low enough to be teasing. Emma's face turned a shade pinker than the strawberry glaze. He's not, she murmured, looking away, but Ethan, just a few feet behind, didn't correct her either. He only glanced toward Emma, caught her eye, and smiled like he had all the time in the world. And for the first time in a long while, so did she. Emma's voice came through the phone just after 8 a.m. Slightly breathless. Ethan, I'm so sorry to ask this, but I just got called in for an extra shift. I won't make it to Sophie's school on time. Could you pick her up today? There was no hesitation. Of course, Ethan said immediately. I'm all ready. Mom's feeling poorly, so I've been sent in her stead. The tiny voice pierced through the afternoon quiet. A little girl, barely past her 4th birthday, had marched right into a blind date, or at least, that's what it looked like to the millionaire CEO, Ethan Carter. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed, a melodic ding-dong that marked the passage of time. 3:35 p.m. Maple and Honey, a bakery renowned for its comforting aroma and handcrafted pastries, buzzed with a gentle afternoon energy. But Ethan, impeccably dressed in a dark charcoal coat that screamed subtle power, sat alone at a corner table, a study in controlled composure. At 35, he'd mastered the art of the stoic facade, a necessary armor for navigating the cutthroat world of tech startups. Blind dates? Those were definitely not in his wheelhouse. But here he was, all thanks to Olivia, his longtime confidant. She'd seen past the polished exterior to the weary soul beneath. And, conveniently, she was close friends with Emma, the very baker who owned this little sanctuary. Olivia's words kept ringing in his ears. Ethan, Emma is different. She's kind, a hard worker, and raising her daughter all on her own. She deserves someone gentle, someone softer. And you deserve someone who lets you breathe. Ethan. He wasn't a believer in fairy tale endings, but he trusted Olivia's judgment implicitly. After 3 years of self-imposed isolation, agreeing to this blind date felt like a tentative step back into the world. A small gamble with potentially big rewards. He glanced at his watch, nearly time. He'd pictured a woman, a touch hesitant, perhaps a little nervous. He definitely hadn't anticipated what came next. The bell above the door announced a new arrival. A tiny figure, barely reaching his knee, waltzed in. She wore a pink dress, its frills a little faded, and sported pigtails. One perfectly aligned, the other doing its own rebellious thing. Little shoes clicked rhythmically on the tile floor as she scanned the room with enormous, inquisitive brown eyes. Then, bam, those eyes locked onto his. Without a moment's hesitation, she marched straight to his table. Ethan blinked, caught completely off guard. Should he stand? Should he speak? Before he could decide, she stopped directly beside him and, with the gravitas of a seasoned diplomat, announced, Mom is sick, so I came instead. The entire bakery seemed to freeze. A barista, mid-pour of a latte, halted in place. A young couple by the counter turned as one, their conversation abruptly cut short. Absolute silence descended. Ethan leaned down, bringing himself to eye level with the miniature envoy. You came, for your mom's date? The girl nodded, her little face set in a mask of resolute seriousness. He softened his tone, his usual CEO speak dissolving. And why would you do that, sweetheart? Her gaze dropped to her feet, and she began to fidget with the hem of her dress, her small fingers tangling in the fabric. Because I overheard Aunt Olivia saying this could make Mommy happy. I don't really know what a date is, but Mommy hasn't laughed for a very, very long time. Her voice, though small, carried a weight of honesty that resonated through the room. Something twisted in Ethan's chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. What's your name? He asked gently. She lifted her chin, a spark of pride in her eyes. I'm Sophie, and I'm 4.5. Mommy is Emma. She works here. She makes the best pies. Ethan recognized the name, Emma, the quiet, blonde woman he'd sometimes seen behind the counter on his occasional after-work visits. Always polite, always focused, but her smile rarely reached her eyes. Sophie, undeterred, continued her explanation. Mommy wanted to call it off. She said she was too tired and achy, but I thought, if someone nice came, maybe she'd try to smile again. a child, barely old enough to tie her own shoelaces, somehow possessed a profound understanding of her mother's needs, an intuition that transcended age. Ethan gestured to the empty chair beside him. Do you like hot chocolate? Her pigtails bounced in enthusiastic agreement as she nodded. While the barista, still a bit dazed, prepared the drink, Ethan engaged his tiny companion. So, Miss Sophie, what else makes your mom happy? Sophie didn't hesitate. She held up her fingers, ticking off the items on her mental list. When I draw her hearts, when I tell her she's pretty, and when I say I miss Daddy, but I'm glad she's here. The words hit him like a soft, unexpected blow, gentle yet devastatingly poignant. He looked at this miniature human, standing before him with nothing but a hopeful heart and a mission to make her mother smile. She wasn't scared, wasn't confused. She was on a mission. This wasn't just a blind date, and this was certainly no ordinary child. As Sophie stirred her rapidly approaching mug of hot chocolate, a faint melody escaping her lips, Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. Her courage, her unwavering honesty, her infectious hope. He didn't know if Emma would ever make an appearance. But in that moment, he realized something with absolute certainty. This isn't about meeting a woman tonight, he thought. This is about meeting the bravest little girl I've ever known. The waitress arrived, carrying 2 steaming plates of pie and Sophie's hot chocolate, piled high with whipped cream. Sophie clapped her hands, her eyes practically sparkling. That's the one Mommy made this morning, she exclaimed, pointing a tiny finger. Blueberry with cinnamon on the edges. She says the cinnamon gives your tummy a big hug. Ethan couldn't help but smile, captivated by her unadulterated joy as she carefully navigated her spoon through the whipped cream. It was like watching sunshine take human form, bright, expressive, and utterly unfiltered. Well, I had no idea I was having dinner with such a pie connoisseur, Ethan said, amusement lacing his voice. Sophie puffed out her chest with pride. I help Mommy in the kitchen. Oh really? What's your specialty? Well, not with the oven part, she admitted. But I decorate the boxes, and I lick the spoon when she's not looking. She paused, her brow furrowed in thought. Mommy always smiles when she bakes blueberry pies. I think it's her happy pie. Ethan leaned back, sipping his coffee. So tell me, Miss Sophie, what other secrets can you reveal about what makes your mom happy? Sophie swung her legs beneath the table, her face a portrait of intense concentration. She laughs when I tell her knock-knock jokes, and when I draw silly faces on her lunch napkins. She leaned in close, lowering her voice as if sharing a top-secret piece of intel. And she said she would only go on a date if the person was nice to me. Ethan chuckled softly. So, am I passing the test so far? Sophie regarded him with the solemnity of a judge reviewing evidence. You didn't laugh when I said I came instead, she stated. That means you're kind. He blinked, momentarily taken aback. That simple, unvarnished honesty wrapped around him. A quiet truth he hadn't realized he craved. A comfortable silence settled between them. Then Sophie tilted her head, her brow furrowed. Where's your little girl or boy? Ethan's smile faded. He looked down, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. I don't have one, he said, his voice a little softer now. I lost someone a long time ago, and I never really found my way back to people after that. Sophie absorbed this with a gravity that belied her age. She seemed to understand things beyond her years. Mommy lost Daddy, she said quietly. But I told her I'd share my heart with her until it doesn't hurt anymore. Ethan swallowed hard. He stared at her, this tiny girl with those wide, knowing eyes and a wisdom that put most adults to shame. You're something special, Sophie, he said, his voice thick with emotion. A shy smile bloomed on her face. The waitress returned, placing a small slice of pie in front of Sophie. Sophie gasped, her eyes widening. It's my favorite. Mommy still baked it this morning, even though she had a fever. Carefully, as if handling a priceless jewel, she cut the pie in half with her tiny fork, pushing the slightly larger portion across the table toward Ethan. You should eat it, she said earnestly. I think you need happy pie more than me. Ethan was speechless. He simply nodded, picked up his fork, and took a bite. The warmth of the flaky crust, the explosion of sweet blueberries, the subtle hint of cinnamon. It was comfort incarnate, a taste of pure, unadulterated care. Just as he swallowed, the bakery door swung open with a bang. Sophie, the voice was strained, breathless, filled with a mixture of panic and relief. A woman stood in the doorway, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her cheeks flushed red from the cold, an apron still tied around her waist. Emma. Her eyes darted across the room, finally landing on her daughter, sitting at a table with a man she didn't recognize. Sophie waved enthusiastically. Mommy, he's really nice, and he loves your happy pie. Emma stared at Ethan, her gaze flicking from his kind expression to the napkin he held delicately in his hand, the one he just used to wipe a smudge of chocolate from Sophie's chin. Ethan stood immediately, his face a mask of apology. Emma, I'm so sorry. She said you were sick. I had no idea she'd come here on her own. I assumed. Emma rushed forward, dropping to her knees and scooping Sophie into her arms. I turned my back for 1 minute, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. You can't just wander off like that, Peanut. Sophie wrapped her arms tightly around her mother's neck. I just wanted you to be happy again, Mommy. Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She looked up at Ethan, the initial fear giving way to a complex blend of embarrassment and gratitude. I had no idea I'm so sorry she bothered you. Ethan shook his head gently. She didn't bother me, he said quietly, his gaze unwavering. She reminded me what kindness looks like. For a moment, the three of them stood there, suspended in time. Outside, the winter wind howled, rattling the bakery windows. But inside, something warmer was beginning to bloom. And Ethan knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was no ordinary evening. This was the start of something unexpected. Something real. After the whirlwind of the unexpected introduction subsided, the bakery settled back into a tranquil quiet. Most of the afternoon customers had departed, leaving behind a peaceful hush. The gentle hum of the ancient heater filled the cozy space, mingling with the faint clatter of coffee cups being washed in the back. Ethan lingered by the door, uncertain whether to stay or leave. Emma was still seated at the corner table. Sophie nestled securely against her chest, fast asleep, her tiny fingers tangled in the soft fibers of her mother's sweater. He cleared his throat softly. "I heard you weren't feeling well," he said, breaking the silence. "Are you any better?" Emma looked up, her expression a mix of lingering embarrassment and exhaustion. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, almost automatically. "Just needed a bit of rest." Ethan offered a small, understanding nod. "Well, how about a warm drink, just for a few minutes? You look like you haven't had a chance to sit down all day." Emma hesitated, her gaze flickering to Sophie, who shifted slightly in her arms, letting out a soft, contented sigh. Gently, Emma adjusted her daughter's position. "Okay," she conceded softly. "Just for a few minutes." Ethan gestured towards a quieter table, tucked away in a corner by the window. The winter afternoon was fading, the streetlights casting an amber glow on the gathering snow flurries. Inside, a sense of warmth enveloped them like a comforting blanket. Sophie remained sound asleep, her cheek pressed against Emma's shoulder. Emma spoke first, her voice low and measured. "My husband, he died 2 years ago," she said, the words hanging in the air like fragile ornaments. "Car accident." One moment, we were planning Sophie's 3rd birthday party, and the next, her voice trailed off, her eyes clouding with distant memories. "I didn't have time to grieve. The rent was due. Sophie needed me, so I baked. I learned from scratch, burned the first 2 months of everything. But the oven, it became the one place where I could pretend that everything was okay." Ethan's gaze remained fixed on her face, unwavering. He saw more than just tired eyes and sleeves dusted with flour. He saw the immense weight she carried on her slender shoulders. "You know," he said softly, choosing his words with care, "someone once told me that the strongest people are often the ones who don't even realize they are." Emma exhaled a breath that was somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. "Well, that person clearly never saw me crying over pie dough at 3 in the morning." Ethan's smile was gentle and sincere. "I think that person would admire you a lot." A comfortable silence descended. He was supposedly on my way, though the truth was he hadn't even left yet. But he wasn't about to argue. An invitation like that didn't need repeating. The preschool yard was a kaleidoscope of activity, a riot of colors from tiny backpacks and brightly painted jungle gyms, the joyous peals of children's laughter mingling with the teacher's cheerful goodbyes. Ethan lingered just inside the gate, his hands buried deep in his pockets, a strange knot of nervousness twisting in his stomach. He scanned the bustling scene, his eyes searching for a familiar flash of a bright pink ponytail and those telltale pink light-up sneakers. And then there she was. Sophie, her eyes sharp as a hawk's, spotted him first. A grin erupted on her face, and she launched herself into motion, running like a tiny, determined wind-up toy, her arms reaching out towards him. She collided with his chest in a burst of pure, unadulterated joy, letting out a squeal that could melt glaciers. "This is my new daddy." The words burst forth like a triumphant fanfare, loud and clear for all to hear. Heads turned, curious eyes focusing on the scene. Parents exchanged amused chuckles, their faces softening at the innocent display. A teacher, leaning against the doorway, raised a playful eyebrow and offered a warm smile. Ethan momentarily froze, the unexpected declaration catching him completely off guard. His mind spun, grappling with how to respond, 1,000 possible reactions swirling in his thoughts. But then he looked down into Sophie's upturned face, her eyes shining with such unwavering trust, such absolute certainty, that something inside him simply gave way. A dam broke, releasing a flood of warmth and affection he didn't know he possessed. He crouched down to her level, gently brushing a stray strand of blonde hair from her forehead. "Then I better be a really good one," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't correct her. He didn't laugh it off as a child's fanciful game. For the first time in longer than he cared to remember, he allowed himself to truly belong, to accept this unexpected role with open arms. They walked, hand in small hand, toward the little ice cream parlor just down the block, Sophie practically bouncing with each step, her excitement radiating outwards like sunshine. "Mommy likes pistachio," she announced between enthusiastic licks of her chocolate cone. "But only when she's sad. When she's happy, she gets strawberry." Ethan chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that surprised even him. "Good to know." She nodded solemnly, as if sharing a vital piece of state secrets. "Sometimes she forgets to turn off the kitchen light," she continued, her brow furrowed in concern. "And once, she fell asleep hugging the laundry basket. Must have been a very comfy basket," Ethan said with a playful grin. Sophie erupted in giggles, spraying a tiny arc of melted ice cream onto the checkered tabletop. Ethan didn't mind a bit. Every small, seemingly insignificant detail Sophie shared about Emma felt like a peek through a window into her world, and Ethan found himself treasuring each and every glimpse. Later that afternoon, as the late afternoon sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they arrived back at the familiar, somewhat worn, rental complex that Emma and Sophie called home. Emma stood framed in the doorway, her apron still tied around her waist, a few stray strands of blonde hair escaping her bun and framing her face. "Bye, Daddy," Sophie called out brightly, waving her sticky hand as she skipped towards her mother. Emma's smile faltered ever so slightly, her eyes widening in surprise. "Sophie," she said gently, her voice carefully measured, "Ethan's just Mommy's friend, sweetheart." Not. Sophie's voice trailed off, suddenly uncertain, the weight of the conflicting messages momentarily dimming her bright spirit. Ethan took a step forward, his heart surprisingly steady, his gaze locked solely on Emma. He could have easily dismissed it as a cute misunderstanding, a product of a child's vivid imagination. He could have smoothly changed the subject, steered the conversation in a safer direction. But he didn't. Instead, he said quietly, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. I want to be her dad, Emma. Emma's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widening with a mixture of surprise and vulnerability. If you'll let me love you, both of you. Emma froze, her fingers unconsciously curling tighter into the fabric of her simple cotton dress, as if seeking grounding. Ethan hadn't declared his love in a grandiose, theatrical way, filled with sweeping pronouncements straight out of a movie script. There were no dramatic speeches, no bouquets of red roses. Instead, his words landed with the quiet weight of truth, solid and unwavering. The kind of love that isn't built on fleeting romantic gestures, but on the consistent, everyday act of showing up, again and again. It was the kind of love that manifested in walking into a child's schoolyard, buying pistachio ice cream, remembering to turn off the kitchen light, and offering something far more profound than mere affection. A safe place to belong, a family to call her own. Emma didn't answer immediately. Her gaze drifted down to Sophie, who now sat perched on the bottom step, humming a tuneless melody to herself, her little legs swinging back and forth. Then, she looked back at Ethan, her eyes brimming with emotion, not with fear, but with something akin to hope, a fragile belief in the possibility of something beautiful. And maybe, just maybe, the very first flicker of yes. Time seemed to unfold with a newfound gentleness after that day. There were no fireworks, no extravagant announcements to the world, just the quiet rhythm of daily routines slowly evolving into something deeper, something more meaningful. Some days, Emma and Sophie would come over to Ethan's small apartment. They'd share a simple dinner around his worn wooden table, then curl up together on the comfortable couch to watch silly cartoons. More often than not, Sophie would drift off to sleep nestled between them, her head resting trustingly on Ethan's chest, her tiny fingers still clutching the TV remote. Emma, too, would sometimes succumb to the comforting warmth, her cheek pressed softly against his shoulder as the city lights blinked softly outside the window. Other days, Ethan would show up at their place, his arrival heralded not by bouquets of flowers or grand gestures, but by a large, slightly worn canvas bag slung casually over his shoulder and a warm, genuine smile that radiated pure happiness. He installed a soft, comforting nightlight shaped like a crescent moon in Sophie's room, chasing away the shadows and filling the space with a gentle, reassuring glow. He added a small, child-sized bookshelf to the corner, then carefully filled it with a collection of well-loved, second-hand storybooks, each one holding 1,000 untold adventures. He even brought a packet of sparkly princess stickers and, with a twinkle in his eye, let Sophie decide where to adorn them. The refrigerator, the bedroom door, even the slightly battered toaster. He never asked for permission, never pushed for acceptance, never insisted on anything. He was simply there. When a light bulb flickered and died, he noticed and replaced it. When something needed fixing, he quietly took care of it. When they laughed, he listened intently, savoring the sound. When they were quiet, he stayed, offering a comforting presence without uttering a word. Over time, almost imperceptibly, Sophie started calling him Daddy without any hesitation, the word flowing naturally and effortlessly from her lips. And Emma, in turn, simply stopped correcting her, allowing the term of endearment to take root and flourish. One day at school, during show and tell, Sophie proudly announced to a circle of wide-eyed classmates, "My daddy makes the bestest pancakes in the whole world, and my mommy laughs more now." And it was undeniably true. Emma's laughter became more frequent, easier, lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders, as if her heart had finally unclenched after years of guardedness. One particularly rainy afternoon, the three of them found themselves crammed together in Emma's tiny kitchen, embarking on an ambitious baking project. Flour ended up dusted through Sophie's hair, transforming her into a miniature, giggling snowman. Chocolate ended up smeared across Ethan's cheek, courtesy of a playful swipe from Sophie's sticky fingers, and Emma couldn't stop laughing when Ethan accidentally dropped a spoon into the whirling mixing bowl, sending a spray of batter across the room. The kitchen was a chaotic mess. Flour coating the floor, colorful sprinkles scattered everywhere, but the sound of their combined laughter echoed through the small space like a joyful song that had no intention of ending. In the midst of all the delightful pandemonium, Emma paused, her gaze settling on Ethan. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, a smudge of dough adorning his cheek, as he patiently helped Sophie pipe frosting onto a tray of adorably crooked cookies. And in that moment, as she watched him interact with her daughter with such effortless love and affection, Emma realized that she had never, in her entire life, known peace like this. Not the sterile, silent kind of peace, but the vibrant, full kind. The kind that didn't fill a space with emptiness, but with an overwhelming sense of belonging, of finally being home. That night, after Sophie had been tucked into bed and the kitchen had been somewhat restored to order, they sat down together at the table, steaming mugs of tea and a plate of imperfectly frosted cookies between them. Ethan reached across the table and gently placed a small, heart-shaped pastry box in front of Emma. Emma smiled, her heart fluttering with anticipation, and carefully opened the box, fully expecting to find another sweet surprise. Perhaps a beautifully decorated cupcake or a delicate macaron. But there was no pastry inside. Nestled in the center of the velvet lining was a ring, simple, delicate, with a tiny, almost imperceptible engraving along the inner band. She looked up at him, startled, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and hope. Ethan didn't kneel. He didn't recite flowery poetry or make any grand pronouncements. He simply reached for her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring, and held it in his. "I won't promise perfection," he said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity, But if you and Sophie will let me, I'll stay. For good. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, not tears of fear or apprehension, but tears of profound relief, of deep-seated recognition, of finally allowing herself to believe that this happiness was real, that she was worthy of this love. From knowing that the man who had unexpectedly walked into their lives wasn't there to fix them, to complete them, or to change them into something they weren't, but simply to love them, unconditionally, exactly as they were. We've been waiting long enough, she whispered, her voice catching on the edge of a watery smile. And in that moment, a family wasn't just created. It was finally, irrevocably acknowledged. Months later, regular customers at Maple and Honey Bakery would often pause near the front counter, drawn to a particular spot on the wall. There, encased in a modest white frame, hung a photograph that told a story far more compelling than any of the delectable pastries displayed in the glass case. 3 people. Emma in her familiar apron, Ethan with his sleeves casually rolled up, and little Sophie standing proudly between them, holding a brightly frosted cupcake in one hand and gripping Ethan's thumb tightly in the other. Below the photo, a small, handwritten sign read, "Our sweetest recipe. Love, patience, and a little flour." If this story touched your heart, you're not alone. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with thunderous fanfare and grand, sweeping gestures. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, holds an umbrella for you in the rain, and makes pancakes on Sunday mornings. Ethan, Emma, and little Sophie reminded everyone who saw their picture that family isn't always about blood ties or shared history. It's about showing up, staying present, and choosing each other every single day. If you believe in stories that heal, that uplift the spirit, and that remind us of the inherent goodness that resides within the world, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales. More heartfelt journeys await you right here, where love always, unfailingly, finds a way.